If you're a web developer, you have absolutely been there, right? Caught right in the middle of the framework wars. React, Vue, Svelte, Next.js. I mean, the debate just never ends. Everyone has a hot take. But how do you actually choose the right tool for the job? Well, let's try to cut through all that noise and figure out what really matters.
And let's be honest, most of the time, the whole debate seems to boil down to this one simple question. We all want the fastest, the most efficient, the undisputed king of performance. It seems like a pretty straightforward question, so let's see if we can get a straightforward answer.
So to do that, we're going to start with the science. No opinions, no hype, just pure, hard data from a controlled experiment. Let's see what happens when you really put these frameworks under the microscope. Okay, so to get a really fair comparison, researchers took a super rigorous approach. They built the exact same simple web app 3 different times, once in Svelte, once in React, and once in Vue. Then they measured everything under the exact same conditions to get a real apples-to-apples comparison. First up, rendering time. So this is how long it takes to just display a list of 1,000 items on the screen. And whoa, the results are pretty stark. Svelte clocks in at a blistering 110 milliseconds. Vue is next, and React comes in third. So, in the race to get pixels on the screen, Svelte takes a really early and decisive lead. All right, next up, bundle size. Now, this is super important for that initial page load speed, because a smaller bundle means a faster start for your users. And once again, Svelte just dominates with a tiny 22 kilobyte bundle. React, just for comparison, is nearly double that size. It really shows off Svelte's lightweight advantage. And what about memory? When the app is just sitting there doing nothing, how much of your device's resources is it actually hogging? Lower is definitely better, especially for phones or less powerful devices. And, you probably guessed it, Svelte is the most memory efficient, using almost half the memory of React while it's just sitting idle. So, what is Svelte's secret sauce here? It really comes down to this number, 1. For every single action, like adding an item to our list, Svelte performs just one direct DOM operation. Now, frameworks that use a virtual DOM, that's kind of an in-memory copy of the real thing, they're way less efficient here. React needs 4 operations, and Vue needs 3. Svelte, because it's a compiler, just creates this hyper-efficient, surgical JavaScript. I mean, based on the data alone, it is the undisputed lab champion. So that's it, right? Case closed. Everybody go home. Use Svelte. Well, not so fast, because raw performance is just one tiny piece of a much, much larger puzzle. The real world is messy, and a project's success depends on way more than just milliseconds and megabytes. Okay, let's switch gears completely. Let's step out of the lab and into the boardroom. And here, the questions aren't about bundle size, they're about business goals, budgets, and, the bottom line. What do the strategists and the decision makers actually care about when they're picking a tech stack? See, for a business, the best framework is the one that lets them ship a reliable product, fast, and without breaking the bank. They're thinking about how quickly their team can build something, how easy it is to hire developers for it, and whether the tech can actually grow with the company. All of a sudden, having a huge community and great documentation might be way more valuable than having the absolute fastest rendering time. And if you just look at who's using what out there, you see this play out. Some of the biggest companies in the world are built on a huge variety of frameworks. You've got Netflix on Node.js, Instagram on Django, Shopify running on Rails. This just proves there's no single best choice. The right tool depends entirely on what the business actually needs to do. Okay, so we've heard from the lab coats, we've heard from the suits. Now let's get down to the people who are actually writing the code, the developers in the trenches. What do they care about? Let's look at some real, unfiltered opinions. So here's a developer who's all about practicality over pure performance. For them, Next.js is the perfect choice because it helps them get a product out the door for a client fast. They're making a trade-off, sacrificing a bit of benchmark speed for much faster development speed. But then, on the complete flip side, you hear this. Other developers feel kind of trapped by Next.js, especially because it's so closely tied to its hosting platform, Vercel. This feeling of vendor lock-in is a huge pain point for devs who really value flexibility and control. So the sentiment is clearly split right down the middle. I mean, Next.js has this massive cutting-edge community, which is a huge pro.
But that same bleeding edge vibe can lead to breaking changes, and for some, a pretty bad developer experience. It just goes to show you, there's no universal good or bad. It's always about the trade-offs. In this quote right here, this really captures a frustration that so many developers feel. This constant hype cycle, the cool tech of the week, it can be totally exhausting. A lot of the time, they just want stable, reliable tools to build things, not to be constantly chasing whatever's new. Stability really matters. Okay, so we've got the lab data telling us one thing. We've got business needs pointing in a totally different direction. And then we've got the developers in the trenches with this whole range of passionate and often contradictory opinions. How on earth do we reconcile these three very different perspectives?
Well, we can use a simple mental model to help. Let's call it the framework triangle. So instead of looking for a single best-in-class winner, we need to think of our decision as a balancing act between three crucial pillars.
Pillar number 1 is performance. That's our lab data. Pillar 2 is project goals. That's the boardroom perspective, all about business needs. And pillar 3 is people, the developers in the trenches, their experience, their happiness, their skills. Each corner of this triangle represents one of the voices we've just heard from. And this really brings us to the main takeaway. The goal is not to find a framework that is perfect on all three of these points. Because, spoiler alert, that doesn't exist. The goal is to find the one that strikes the right balance for your specific situation. Maybe you sacrifice a little bit of raw performance for a much better developer experience. Or you choose a framework your team already knows just to meet a tight deadline. It's always a trade-off. So ultimately, the choice really comes down to you and your project. Are you building, say, a high-frequency trading app where every single millisecond counts? Or are you building a content site where your team's productivity and speed to market are everything? By thinking about these three pillars, performance, project goals, and people, you can move past the hype and make a really informed decision. So the real question is, what does your triangle look like?